Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Ampliverse Book Club. We are back with a new selection. This month, we read the novel Invisible Child. Pardon my nails. Invisible Child: Poverty, Survival, and Hope in an American City by Andrea Elliott. So today, I'll introduce our book club hosts using quotes from today's book. A triumph. RJ, that's me. Hello. Next up, we have a future American classic, Allie. Hello, Allie.
Hi.
And finally, she will haunt your heart. It's Catherine. Hi, Catherine. I saved the most dramatic for you.
Always, always. And I appreciate it. I do. I do.
Of course. All right, we are going to be discussing this book, Invisible Child. It is 510 pages of absolute intense
Sorrow.
storytelling from the perspective reported to the story of Dasani and her family living in New York City. So we're going to start out by just kind of like talking what we thought about generally about this book. And Allie, since you had brought the book to us, why don't we start with you? What did you think of the book, finally being able to read it?
Okay, well, I already apologized to you guys, but listeners, I'm so sorry. Uh this was really heavy. So I mentioned in the last episode I came upon this there the a follow-up article was published last October, and I read about it in the New York Times Daily Briefing. So I came upon it as the series in the New York Times. And it I really like long form articles like that were published, and so I found myself getting really just finding myself really I can't think of the right word, but really kind of losing myself in the world, and finding
Yeah.
myself really wrapped up in the story and compelled by it. This book, like I said, it's really heavy, but I think it's really important. I think I get kind of moony-eyed about journalism sometimes. And I think, to me, like, when I get moony-eyed about, like, we need good journalism, to me this is like a prime example of why we need reporters out there basically embedding themselves. And I think this is, to my knowledge, a more unique instance because she was, with the family for like 10 years.
Yeah.
um and I think it's so important that the author Andrea Elliott was able to do that and to be able to share the story in such a detailed and compelling way. So, yeah. Was
So
that your
you liked it?
question? I'm sorry. I liked it in the way that a person can enjoy a sad story. I
Something, yeah,
mean,
as
yeah,
heavy as this.
I'm very glad that I read it.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Catherine, how about you? What did you think of this book?
Well, I thought it was a great book. We'll start there. The writing was fantastic. I totally understand what you mean by you were just like pulled in.
Mhm.
Because I felt that, just like you were saying, that long form article type of writing, but I also was really it was very captivating, but I had to take so many breaks because it was
Mm.
so emotional. It was like it was a lot. The reality of homelessness, and it really did that. It really put,
Yeah.
and I remember reading in the book when they talked about the articles coming out, how that's what people said, like Dasani put a face on homelessness. And that really is what it does, but it doesn't just put a face on it, it puts a family on it. It puts generational poverty in a specific context. And it's just devastating. And I also never have found myself more enraged with politicians, just in a
Mhm.
general sense, because I'm like, this is real life. Like, this is
Yeah.
happening to human beings, to children. And I wanted to be like, I wish that every politician and anyone that's ever going to stand outside of Planned Parenthood had to read this book before and tell people not to get abortions. They need to read this book before they have anything. I'm like, you need to help these people. Let's start
Mhm.
here. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's just, it was very, very emotional for me, but it was an amazing book. It's just a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I share everyone's sentiments of like it was just so well crafted, well thought of. Like obviously knowing the time and effort the author Andrea Elliott was a part of the family, just as, and she explains it in the book too, of like I was there to observe, I was there to report, like really just showing the reality of the situation from their perspective as the family in between everything. And I felt like it felt like such a feat of like writing. I felt like some of the books that we've read before, Ali, I felt the same way. Like there's just like something like technically impressive about what she did, and it was just like,
Mhm.
wow. I mean, this is why they don't hand out Pulitzers to anybody. Like this is like actual like I did the thought process and the brain power to be able to like not only like obviously like just have so much information to try and process and filter to create a story, but also just creating the narrative that will give the effect of what happened to Catherine, of like will make audiences really like fully understand, not showing everything at once, or not just like, sensationalizing everything, really like taking us through like bit by bit of like the realities of the situation. um I did want to ask then, we've kind of already touched upon it, but like, what did we find challenging about our reading experience? I mean, yes, we've said like, yeah, the material is definitely heavy, but were there anything else that kind of stood out to you as like really challenging to get through with this book?
I think for me it kind of uncovered a lot of internal biases that I had.
Mhm.
And just things that, living in a racist society, you just kind of internalize and don't realize it until the stone's uncovered. And
Yeah.
I found that there were times that really allowed for a lot of self-reflection where I was reading and I was like, when Dasani was taking care of the kids, and I was like, okay, Chanel doesn't have a job. Why would she not help out with this? Why wouldn't
Yeah.
she go out and get a job? And I was like, why am I more upset with Chanel than I am with the actual system that makes it impossible for her to, maintain regular employment? Like, why am I not more upset
Mhm.
about the like systemic obstacles that are keeping her from you know, living life more fully? And so that was something that I found I really had to keep kind of pulling my focus back to, like, it's not about the people, it's about these terrible systems that they are forced to navigate their way through.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I think the first time I felt fully like switching that to like really like, oh, it's the system that they fully are not set up for success, is the like when they had to go to their like like family therapy, so that way she can get a stipend out of that, but then like it's at a specific time that by the time they're able to get back to Auburn, their shelter, it was already lights out, or like it was already past the time that they were able to come in, so they couldn't even sleep that night, and like it's just those things of like I found myself thinking the same way for a lot of the adults, especially Chanel and Supreme, who are like tasked as the parents of this family unit to step up, but there were so many things structurally, emotionally, like like the trauma that like Supreme couldn't even like get to a lot of the things that he was supposed to do because of the trauma he suffered. Like it was just, yeah, it definitely made me also check into myself. I'm like, okay, before I pass judgment on how frustrated I am about they can't get past like what the barriers that they have, it's like, because when you're already beaten down, like what strength do you have left to kind of break down the things that you can't control?
I'm honestly kind of surprised that I didn't have those moments, but I've had those moments with other things that I've read.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I wonder if that's why. But for me, the very first moment that I was like already like the system is trash. I mean, obviously we all know that, but when it was talking, I specifically wrote down chapter 9, June. And the book goes into so many details, but June is like an ancestor of theirs who was a soldier
Mhm.
and essentially was unable to succeed, was not set up for success because he was a black man.
Yeah.
And it's like to look at something like that and to have people say, well, why the kinds of things that we sometimes originally think, like, why can't they have a job, like, and then to look how many generations, literally
Mhm.
generations, it goes back of, well, he tried, he was a soldier, he was fighting for his country, he was doing this, he was doing that, and then he couldn't get a home, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just it, immediately I was like, how could his children succeed? And how could his children's children succeed? Like, when
Mhm.
nothing is changing. Like, they are placed on this path, and they are not given a route out. Like, it
Yeah.
is it is so hard to dig your way out of that. So,
Yeah, owning a home. This scared me so much about owning a home that literally, like, halfway through the book, I had to like tell Adam, like, we need to generate wealth because I feel like we have done nothing, and and it could just disappear. Like, and they make it very clear in the book, like that is really the only one of the main ways to really succeed in America for you and for the family that you want to carve out for in this country is to accrue like generational wealth by owning land, and it's like there are so many things you have to get to, and like only a certain amount of privileges are able to like let someone even have that as a possibility. It really scared me. I was like, oh my god, we have
Mhm.
to like focus on this very soon, otherwise yeah, it's just terrifying.
Yeah, I will say, and I don't know if this was something that you had wanted to talk about later, and just in terms of the
Yeah.
articles, but in the original series, there wasn't a whole lot. It was much more just like a narrative of Dasani's life. And so
Interesting.
the entire familial history, the
Yeah.
stories about June, the stories about Joni, and even the history that was involved in it was not in the original series. And so that was
mm,
something that I was very glad that I decided to read the book, because there was so much rich content in there,
Yeah.
that I learned so much just about, I mean, redlining and like
Yeah.
the policies after World War II, and
yeah,
how so many Americans are like, look what we did after World War II, and it's like, yeah, for white people.
right,
And so
100%.
yeah, a lot of that was in there, wasn't in the article series, and so I'm glad that she was allowed a format to expand on that and to inform people about that.
Yeah, similarly, I mean, this wouldn't have been in the article series anyway. It was past that point in the book where she was, talking about the article series in retrospective anyway. But the
Hmm.
whole neuroscience of poverty aspect was something that I had literally never heard of, never thought about. And when I was reading it, I was like, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Like, of course your cortisol is going to be through the roof. Of course that's going to affect your development when you're a young
Yeah.
child going through constant stress. Of course all of these things are going to set you up not only financially and geographically, not, to fail, but also physically and mentally and obviously emotionally. So that was definitely something that, to me, it's interesting that she didn't include that stuff in the articles, which I'm sure, you have a limited amount of
Yeah.
space, but it's like that's the journalism part of it to me, all of that
Hmm.
depth. And so it's really, I agree that this is it's great that she was able to take what she had done and deepen it.
Yeah, and I mean, going more into the just how that all came to be, like with this being a longer or series in the New York Times first before being able to get, a full format with the book. I think like a lot of what we've already said of like the reporting of the deeper dives of like specific moments in history, like I think like in another setting or in a different book, I think I would get annoyed with it because it's like, I don't, why do we need to care about like who this building was named after? But then the context that she provides of like, all the buildings that are in Brooklyn are like slave owners, like, and they have to like buy, the school names, like those are names that they have to like live off of. The history with Hershey and like forming the school, and even like the backstories of like the house parents that Dasani had, and even some of the foster parents as well, like in the later part of the book with the different children, like without knowing all of that context, you do just get like a one-sided view. But with the context, it's like everyone really is just trying to do their best in all of these situations. Like it definitely hit me the most when it came to like the different foster situations at the end of the book of like even in the even as like the answer from like child services is like sending them to a foster situation, it's not even a guaranteed like it could end well because you don't know the complete backstory of those foster parents that they could end up with. So but yeah, I wonder if there are anything else from like that kind of that translation from the reporting portion of it that you want to bring up with the book, or even like with with Andrea Elliott. Like I think like I didn't realize that they would like she would address herself in the book. I like didn't assume. So when it happened, I like actually was like, oh wow, it's so cool to hear like that point of view from the story of like sometimes she would call me, sometimes she needs me to
Mm-hmm.
she needs a ride, or she needs me to like be an adult in a situation where no one could be there for. So
Yeah, I had that same moment where I was like, "Oh, we're whoa, wow. Hi.
yeah,
Hi."
I'm here, I'm literally right there in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. Yeah.
I don't know if it struck you guys at all, but I thought it was really interesting, and it might have been specifically in the afterword that she talks about this.
Mm.
But so the author, she talks about in the book that her mom is from Chile, but
Hmm.
she self-identifies as a white woman, and I thought that was really interesting. And she talks, I think it's in the afterword, about how it
Mm.
was kind of a double-edged sword, where if she was with acquaintances of Chanel and Supreme, they would kind of look at her with suspicion, but then if they were in situations with like ACS, that they felt like they were afforded more respect because there was a white person there with them.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting to me, that what would it the book have been like if say Andrea Elliott couldn't pass as a white person, or like I just think overall the role that race plays, I mean it plays a very prevalent role in the book,
Hmm.
but just in the sole fact of um her being white and passing as white, I mean self-identifying as white, I just think it's an interesting thing to note, if anything
Yeah,
else.
I definitely don't think she would have gotten the same um I don't know if access is the right word, but there is like a neutrality of race when like a white person is involved that like um I felt like it I'm sure worked in her advantage in some of those situations too, like especially when yeah, like a third party is involved that have to like pass judgment on the family. I was also just like shocked at how much access she actually had for the family itself. Like they were able
Yes.
to like really share a lot that I don't think like
Mhm.
in I don't know, like I feel like I would have hesitation of sharing like, because it's like yeah, you're opening up like the but I do understand like there may have been like a kind of bigger impact, and maybe since this was already like the the New York Times articles have already been out there, so like they probably saw this as an opportunity to tell the story, like to be able to tell a more real like genuine story and like really be able to dig back to really show like look, it was always this hard for us, like from Joni, from our grandfather, like all the way back. And like I'd like that kind of spirit of being able to really open up more for the sake of like because I want people to know what we go through, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm so sorry that this is not 100% on topic, but maybe it's a decent segue. I don't know.
Yeah, go for it,
But
go for
I
it.
I feel so deeply for poor Papa,
Oh
who
my
just
god.
loved this movie and saw a
No.
different life that
Yeah.
that fiction showed to him, and him being young and not fully understanding what he was doing. Just I mean, to go from running away from home because of Annie, essentially,
Hmm.
because he enjoyed the movie Annie, to where he was at the end of the book, where he's on psychotropic medications. Like
Yeah.
he is really struggling. He's been struggling for years. Like I just it was so sad to me and so sobering, because it's like how many little white kids like run away, You know what I mean? And it's like
Mhm.
Mhm.
he just happened to slip out at just the right time, and just and it's like, would any of that have happened if he had not been black, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't go it's not a surprise to say that I really feel for these kids. Especially the younger ones, because you see the the love that Dasani puts in at a young age of like, I no one can take care of these children but me. Um and that kind of almost like came back to her many ways, but like especially like at school, when the principal like says like, you're being forced to be their mother and you're not supposed to, and like I have to put a stop to that because it's not, it's not bettering you. And I do like kind of like going with that, like talking institutionally now, like the structures, like this story is set in New York, and I felt like it's such a good example of that kind of like, uh it is, I feel like in media, in literature, in every sort of pop culture representation, like this is meant to be like the city where like of dreams, and historically has been that way, but like it's really set up that like you there is a like a stratification, there is like a system here where the lowest stay at the lowest. And I don't know, as like someone who immigrated to America, there's always that like belief of like the American dream of like, there is no rate like class system here, like everyone has the opportunity to be able to rise to the top. And like, I don't know, this book is clearly like, people keep living off of this idea, and it's clearly not that, because a lot of the systems that are in place like convince you that you can do that, so it doesn't want you to like, seek the services that you actually need to like live. And I feel like our, the characters in the book, especially Chanel, like, and Supreme, like the parents have really made a lot of decisions because of that. It's like, I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to, because we can hustle our way out of this, but like sometimes it's just too much, or like we've said, like the system is already in place where they can't. Um, so yeah, I really found it almost like maze like, that they couldn't get past like what was already like in place where they lived.
Mhm. I think too, one of the things that really struck me was how the smallest thing could happen and just set off a chain of
Yeah.
events, or like you could be doing literally everything right. Like one of the things that really struck me was Miss Hester, the teacher,
Hmm.
where she got evicted from her apartment and like she had no choice but to go to a homeless shelter. And
Yeah.
just a story like that where it's like, sh-
She did all the
that's I
things.
mean, she did everything, it's like, I
Yeah.
can't imagine being in her situation and being like, "I've done literally everything right." It's the city of New York. Like, I read that and I was like, "How can they just evict her?" And then you
Hmm.
have no other option for affordable housing. I could Oh god, that yeah.
Yeah, like to that, like, and later on, like both Chanel and Supreme kind of go through that, like in their process of trying to get back their children. Like Chanel's hearing, even though like she tries to sober herself up, she gets this hair follicle test. Um, like she can't find employment, but she goes to her case person. I can't think of the word.
Caseworker.
Caseworker, yeah, Marisol, like seeing her every day. And then like when it came for the hearing, all of her reportings were like, nope, she wasn't trying to find, like she wasn't doing all of this. And like, um just like, and then like in contrast to like Supreme, like he's putting all of these like, requests for help, and then all of a sudden like
I could not.
all of a sudden they get money in their account, and like
I could
everything
not.
gets fixed. But because like he wasn't like awake, basically they were like, he didn't answer any of our
At this
calls, we
one
had to like
moment.
yeah, at this one exact moment. That means that he denied help, even though like, the ACS has provided all of the services that they need to, and he
Oh,
had to like, be detained, or like he had to have a warrant for him.
That whole section
Ugh,
infuriated me.
I know, me
Infuriated me
too.
because he was like, I don't have any money for my kids because you won't let their mom in the house, and all of their money for their
Goes
food
to her.
goes to their
Yeah.
mom, and I can't find their mom because I'm not supposed to let her in this house, and she's mad. And then the guy's like, well, I'll bring you some gift cards. Oh, I'm sick. I can't come bring you gift cards for 3 or 4 days. You knew they had no money. None.
Yeah.
How were those kids going
Yeah.
to eat? They were counting on you. Like, I don't
Yeah.
care if you're sick. Go anyway. I'm not at work, but I'm going to come here and give you guys the gift cards that I promised you so you can have some food, or bring you some food. And then it was just insane because it was just like you said, it was one thing after another. And Supreme fully was like, this is a problem. I need help. And everyone ignored him. This is a problem. I need help. This is a problem. I need help. And then once they fix it all, they're like, this was all a problem and it's all his fault because he didn't ask for help. And it's like,
Yeah.
bruh.
Yeah,
Like,
I
oh,
was so frustrated when the money came like literally at last minute. So that way on paper it was like, nope, the money was given. The inspection was made and blah blah blah. It was and I obviously have not been this is the situation, but I have also had frustrations of like semantics in this way before with just like random things that we have to do for government, like getting my license plate or like getting or doing my taxes, that I'm just like, I understand the like frustrations, and it's just like, but it's so unfair that like people who literally don't have basic needs have to go through worse. Like, I'm okay if I have to wait 4 hours in line to get my license plate. That's fine. But if people who can't eat
right.
have to wait like a week
And for him to
for
wait,
something,
wait
yeah.
and wait and apply, and they deny him. And it's
Yeah.
like, do you
And
see that
then
I have
die of
all
like
these children?
semantics. Yeah.
Exactly. Like,
It's
oh,
like denied of like, oh, you didn't fill something correctly or whatever. Oh my god. It is. It's very frustrating. I definitely felt, I did not expect to feel for Supreme, because I wasn't like sure of like how I wanted to feel about him throughout. But I think that's like the
he
point of
had
the
his
book, is like
moments.
no one is perfect. Like none
Oh,
of the
yeah.
Yeah.
adults are perfect.
Yeah, and I think it's like, regardless of whether or not we think they're a good person or a bad person or a good
Yeah.
parent or a bad parent, like, people don't deserve to be treated that way.
Yeah.
Like, everyone deserves to be treated like a human, and they aren't.
And that's one of the
Yeah.
points that she makes in the afterword, when she talks about how she brought this concept to her editors, and they said, you need to make it about children because children are blameless. They're born into this situation, into this life they didn't ask for. And
Mhm.
that is exactly where you start. And so I mean, I totally understand why that's where they started, but to be able to then take it backwards, as we've talked about a few times, and take it all the way back through the generations of this family, and see how they've always been handed the shit end of the stick,
Yeah.
and they are not unique. That's the painful
Mhm.
part, that this is one of many stories. This is just the story that we have access to. And so
Yeah.
it's just, I'm just like, literally everyone in public service needs to read this book. Like, it needs to be
I
required
know.
reading. Every single person, all the way down and up the whole ladder. I don't care. Read it.
And yeah, and like that is the frustrating part of the like of the whole idea, is like the the public service like structures that are in place that are meant to help. And like, she talks about like different contexts of like whoever's the president or the mayor will add their own take to it, or like their own platform to whatever services are available. But like they're all already built in a flawed structure that like, and not equal structure, that any fixes that you try to like slather on top of it will just kind of like further create more conflict and challenges for a lot of people.
It's a band-aid on a broken bone.
Literally, yeah, yeah.
Burn
I
it
will
all
say
down.
like, I know, just starting you. There was that one. I wrote this one quote. Smaller degradations were part of daily life, and like that kind of feeling of like it's just these small things that kind of add up, that kind of weaken everyone to not want to like push further. But Allie, you brought this up earlier of like, kind of like highlighting a lot of the like frustration that we may have had reading it when they can't kind of like progress further. So in the center of this whole story is Dasani, who is like the oldest child in this family unit. And throughout the story, Dasani is kind of like built up as like she is the one that's going to make it out. She has real talent. She is fast. She's as strong as any boy. She knows how to dance. Like there are so many talents to her. She like wrote poetry in school. Like
And she's
she's just
smart.
she's smart. Yeah, she's the one that can get out of it. And the book kind of takes a turn when she does get given that opportunity and go to the Milton Hershey School, which I did not know was a thing until I read this. And I was like, oh, and
Me
like I said
either.
earlier, like getting the backstory of like Hershey, of like finding out like his purpose for it. It was like, wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his wife Kitty.
Oh, Kitty. I know. Yeah, and like she is given like the setting, right? The setup that like she can kind of like move past where she came from, and wanted to know like what did you guys think about kind of like that turn in the story of Dasani at Hershey?
I'm just thinking about this now, but maybe this was my moment where I kind of let my privilege
Mm,
color the way that I read the story.
mm,
Because in this part of the story, I was like, yes, she's going to do it. But then, it would flip back to her family. And I was like, oh, this is so sad. And I felt sorry for them, but at the same time, I was like, "You got this, like, you go," you know?
yeah, yeah,
And in hindsight, like and then when she, ultimately left, obviously, I was like at first I was devastated. I was like, "Why? Why would she do this? Why would they let her do this to her
hmm,
future?" Like, and it's like in hindsight, and even in hindsight while reading, I was like, but it's her family is still her family. Like who
yeah,
she is still who she is. And they were kind of trying to erase that.
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I think my thoughts on Hershey. So I think there's one of those things is like there's never going to be a perfect solution, right?
hmm,
But there seemed to be some pretty obvious things that I was like, I think they should fix that. So, like, one of the things that I took major issue with was her going from one home to another between middle school and high school and like
yeah,
going to, I was like, how is that any different than foster families and like splitting up a parent from
yeah,
a child from, I was like, this is the, like, you're putting these people into their home, you're encouraging them to think of them as parents and like your housemates as your sisters, and then what are you're saying, "Oh, okay, you're in high school now. You're living in a different house with different people." I really got upset about that. And
yeah,
I also took a huge issue with the like this like philosophy of work, this like work will set you free type deal. Like
hmm.
when they would get punished, like the punishments were so draconian. Like she was having to go clean out like horse manure, and
Yes.
I think in those situations too, it's like, okay, you're taking a fish out of water here. You're putting a city
Yeah,
girl into the rural country, and she's already feeling out of place, and you're just making it worse. Like you're making her do these things that like emphasize the fact that she's not at home anymore. Like
yeah,
never in New York City is she going to be made to like clean out a horse stall, right? And
yeah,
so I took a lot of issue with some of the things, and I think especially too like kind of promoting that idea of like if you just work hard things will happen for you, and it's like I don't think that you can promote that when you're at a place like Hershey that literally has so much money that
hmm,
like you can give an $80,000 scholarship to every student graduating and
And they just pick one kid out of, what do they say, 14% of applicants come in.
yeah.
It's like all those other kids are working hard too.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's such a weird, it's like going back to that idea of American Dream, like which I'm sure was real when Milton Hershey was around, like in the turn of the century, but there are so many things now that like, we have to think about, and that layers that like, yeah, that just it's such a, you know, like, yeah, band-aid way of thinking about it, of like, if we just teach them like discipline and like skills that like, yeah, like hard work can solve anything, then they can just apply that to every problem. It's like, yeah, but there are so many problems, and all of
Mhm.
those problems can't be fixed by like hard work and determination. They talk about like grit, right? Like it's not just like can be solved by like having that magical grit that can solve anything or can bring someone to like fix all of their problems. Yeah,
Right.
I didn't think about that, like switching families, until you mentioned that. And I'm like,
Me
yeah, that
either.
is, especially since she like was forming a connection with those first two white
Right.
people that she was
Right.
with.
Right.
Well,
And her
but
best friend
that's okay.
Kaylee,
Yeah, yeah, Kaylee, yeah.
that's all was her best friend. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're splitting up sisters again.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, and that's kind of what I mean is like I bought into it. I was like I bought into the philosophy that they have. Like and again, it's flawed. I
Yeah, and you're like,
totally
this is
agree.
great.
I'm
Like,
like, this
yes,
is
like
great.
just
She's
do
gonna make
it.
it. Forget the
Yeah.
other, however many
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of kids that need this help. We got this one, you know? It's
Yeah.
like, what good is that? I mean, it's not that it's nothing, but the one thing though that I wasn't buying into the whole time, it made a brief mention about how only a small percentage of them go to therapy. And I
Thank
was
you.
like,
Yeah.
this is not,
Thank you.
I don't know about
Yeah.
that. But then they talked about Dasani going to therapy, and I was like, maybe I misinterpreted, like, because I was just in
Because
it.
she
I
was in
was
it. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
glad. But it definitely was like a flawed perspective that I had. But 100%, every one of these kids needs therapy, like all day, every day.
Yeah. Like, I'm shocked that that wasn't just like even just a thing, you know? Yeah. I like, as someone who went to private school all of his life, like, I definitely like, it's a heartbeat away from boarding school. Like, if if there was an option, I think my parents would have probably put me there too. But like, there is something about that, like, I don't know, like I may have just probably been like not traumatized, but I just have like such conflicted feelings about that time, because it's like I didn't trust the kids around me, like, you know, like especially like in that environment, like there were still people picking fights with her, even though that, you know. And I think like that's kind of what threw me off of like, I saw all the decisions that she made at Hershey like almost justified in a way, because it's like it's just so heightened and focused when she's there, because they're still there. There are still kids picking on her. There will still be like, you know, things that were like she can't physically do, or like she has to like, the first time she's like having to like face like her own personal like things that, you know, like she wasn't able to like
Trauma.
outsmart or outmaneuver when she was out on the streets, that are just like now hyper focused, you know, for her to face on.
Yeah, I also like I took issue with the fact that, so the fight that ended up getting her suspended, I'm pretty sure was on the walk either to or from school.
Mhm.
And like they're putting those kids in that situation in those and
Yeah, when
I'm
she
not
said they
saying,
have to walk like 40
yeah,
minutes to
yeah, and
school.
I'm not saying, I understand that like you can't keep an eye on kids 100% of the time, but it was one of
Yeah.
those things where it was like you're putting them in this situation where you know that there's tension, the tensions are high, you know that she has a history of getting into physical altercations, and still I don't know, I just, it rubbed
Yeah.
me the wrong way.
I also like, I think that the pattern, and I don't think that this was intentional, but again, I think it's part of what I'm figuring out, that I just bought into the whole deal. Like, the pattern of talking about when she goes home, she comes back and she's a mess. And then we get her
Yes.
back to where she needs to be and she's fine. And then she goes home or she talks to her mom and then she's a mess. And it's because she's trying to, I mean, not exclusively, but a big part of it is because she's trying to mesh who she is, not who she once was. She is still this person from this
Mhm.
family. She's still Dasani, with who society and Hershey
Yeah.
is telling her she needs to be to succeed.
To
But
succeed.
she sees her family failing because
Yeah.
she's not there. Now, is it because she's not there? No, not at all. But that's
Yep.
what she sees.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I think was like really challenging to read, was that she's equating her not being there as like her fault, when in reality it's really not. It's like, just because that's what's happening, like she's kind of like combining those feelings with the same feelings that she has at Hershey, where it's like she feels like she's being stripped of who she is. Which I honestly like. The first red flag was when that white man was like, "Do you know what code switching is? You should probably think about doing that." And I was like, we don't want to do that. That's the we have to do that to survive. Don't tell a kid like, "Yeah, you should probably like show a more, appropriate side when you're at Hershey, and then you can talk as however you'd like when you're like at home." It's like, oh no. That was really, it was very like Get Out for me, of like, this does not seem like good advice to tell someone. Ay, ay, ay.
I
But yeah,
also
I
definitely
did.
didn't realize that dude was white. I thought that he was also black, and that was why he was having that conversation with it. Not that it necessarily improves it, but I did not realize that he was a white man. I skipped that part clearly.
Yeah, it was like yeah, because they were the like Christian couple, like the like white
Oh, that
Christian
first
couple.
group, the first
Hmm.
couple. The
Yeah,
second couple, at least one of them was not white,
they
right?
yeah,
I
the
think the
they
the
both are,
husband,
right?
yeah,
Or the
he was
husband.
black and she was Latinx.
Yes,
Hmm.
that's what I thought. Yes.
So like, and that like, she did say that like they did have a good kind of relationship, because he was able to kind of see through all the actions that she was doing.
Right. And she really looked up to him.
Hmm. Well, let's kind of like really sink into Dasani's life now, and really, since she is the center of this story, like, I think the s- the writing definitely does a great job of always kind of checking in on Dasani, telling what's happening in the situation, then checking back in on Dasani, and then checking in with Chanel too. And like, there's a clear link there, right? Like, they have I think, like, especially as they get older, there is a stronger bond there between them, of like, because it's almost as if like, I kind of took it at the end as like, it's almost as if Chanel is seeing Dasani, like, Chanel can is Dasani is the closest thing that Chanel, like, to what she experienced. Like, she's the closest person that can understand like what I'm going through, because she has had to fill in for me for so many of like our life together. And there was something about like always constantly like seeing the parallels of like Chanel kind of like dipping in and out of her drug addiction, and just like her, stealing her have to steal to like survive, and then to even like, obviously not in a big sense like that, but Dasani, like, when she reverts back to all of her like more like violent tendencies, or like being aggressive, and then there's that like kind of unique like weird link that they have of like, they're kind of proud of each other, of the decisions that they make, but also like Chanel obviously wants Dasani to be better. There's so many like good ends of the chapters of like Chanel being like, you you have to be different from us, like, you have to really, you can't you can't go through the life that I did. But then like, would sometimes
It's
have
such a
moments of
nuance.
like, her telling her that like, yeah, you need to fight back, or like, it's such a
Or moments
complicated
of like
relationship.
telling her she was nothing. Like it was
Yeah,
such a nuanced relationship because I think that you're right. I think there was a lot of Chanel seeing herself in Dasani, and because of that, she wants her to succeed. But then when she is succeeding to the point of bragging in certain moments,
takes her
Chanel's like,
down.
"You're nothing
I
because you're just like
know.
me. Like, how dare you act like that?" And so
Ugh.
it is a very complicated relate that I don't understand fully for sure.
Yeah, yeah. it for me too, like, I was kind of really struggling, because every time there was something to bring them closer, I feel like more often than not Chanel does something to kind of like break that mold. or break that, which, understanding Chanel's childhood and even understanding like her own mother's childhood, like it's
I think it's an attachment, like a trauma response, honestly.
yeah,
I love you, no, leave me alone. I love you, no,
yeah,
leave me alone. Like, you're doing so great. Wait, don't like, if you're not gonna succeed, I don't want you to think that you were going to. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Like, I think it has to do with trauma, not having grown up in that kind of experience. I don't know for sure, but that's my best guess.
Yeah. And it's hard because Dasani does kind of like go through life having different fill-ins for what like a, like ideal like maternal figure for her. Like we've had Miss Holmes, the principal, um and in some cases like the different like kind of mothers that filled in for her in Hershey and in New York. And it's just, yeah, it always kind of goes back to like her bond with Chanel. And I don't know, they feel so much more tethered to each other that I think like it's also like being afraid of like knowing that like if they do never see each other again, like even if they do succeed, and like Dasani had that experience, like even if Dasani fully like is like Hershey, like this is who I am now, there is always going to be something that she's always going to miss her mother and like that like bond that they had growing up together and surviving together.
There's there's this term, it's called, well, it's a word, it's enmeshment,
Mm,
which is essentially when a family has no boundaries and there's no real parent role, it's like
yeah,
everybody is kind of equal, there's no boundaries. And I think it's, so many times throughout the book, it's like you have to stay together, you can't split up, all the kids need to stay together,
mm-hmm,
they're walking down the street and they're saying pair up, and they're crossing highways and things like that. And I think it's this interesting thing of, they, that might not have been the healthy thing to do, but it's what they had to do to survive. But it's the issue of, okay, now I'm in a place where I don't have to do that anymore.
yeah,
How am I supposed to make the healthy choice? This is what
yeah,
I did my entire life to survive. And now you're telling me that if I keep doing this, I'm not going to be able to survive. It's this
yeah,
really, really complicated thing. And I think that's something too, like with Chanel, when she would go through those, like, she'd be proud and then she'd, like, put Dasani down. And it's this thing of like, she's recognizing like Dasani is doing these things that helped Chanel survive her childhood and her young adulthood. But she's also recognizing, okay, she's doing those things that helped me get to where I am, but like also look at where I am. This is not where I want my daughter to be. So
yeah,
it's, yeah, it's
Right.
it's a very,
And
it's a,
that makes perfect sense too with the whole I want you to do better, I want you to do better, no, you're not anything. Like, it's like
mhm.
I want you to do better, and then it's like this risk of losing essentially a part of yourself because of how enmeshed the family is. And when she sees, oh no, I could lose her to success, be that
yeah,
in the form of Hershey, be that in the form of that guy's team, I don't remember what kind of team it
giant,
was, Giants team,
Yeah.
in the
yeah,
form of running in one of those races. Like, any of those moments give her a glimpse of
yeah.
losing that part of herself.
Yeah, that's true. Like I just remembered like all those times like with Giant, like Chanel not calling him back or like not answering his call so that Dasani knew like when the next like, training is. Like even those things of like, and she, Dasani even says that like you gave me a way out, but then you take them away from me too. I, well, I think like the final feels of our book of this discussion is that for me at least, what I really did kind of take away from it is that there is obviously like um kind of like I don't know, like there's something beautiful about the different ways that people kind of like get through their situation. And like I mostly think about like more of the times in Dasani's like childhood, especially with like the writing and like the one main thing I remember is her live or die video game idea of like that's how she processed her life, was like, this is a video game. I don't know, there was just something about moments like that where I will take away as something that like we all have our ways to kind of like get through, especially even for their family that have to go through incredible circumstances to kind of get through it. But yeah, what did you guys have for your final feels?
Just like a deep breath, you know. I just,
I know.
I think I'm very grateful that Dasani and Chanel were willing to share their stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I and I just hope they're okay.
Yeah.
It was, and it's kind of a hard thing. It's one of those stories where you kind of feel like there's not going to be any satisfying ending, right?
Yeah.
Like what, and I think that's life, right? But
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah,
I will say, like, it did give me a satisfied ending to like see Dasani and Aviana reunite um as sisters. They kind
mm-hmm,
of like had a falling out, especially in high school, but like they
mm-hmm,
were able to kind of like basically just see each other very vulnerable of like we still need each other, or like, you
yeah,
know, uh that I did kind of like like was so satisfied at the end of just like knowing that
yeah,
like they are still back in each other's lives.
And to know that Papa got to come back home too.
mm-hmm,
I did. And I
Yeah.
I just I feel my soul hurts for him in particular because he was so little and he had no
Yeah.
idea the ripple effect, the giant tidal wave that he was going to cause by just this tiny little silly childhood wish.
I
And
know.
yeah, so I guess my final, I feel the same way. I'm rooting for him. I just really hope that, I hope against hope, I hope that all of this money that people have raised for them, I hope that someone
Mhm.
teaches the children how to use it to be able to claw their way out. Do I think that that's fair that they have to do that? No, but I still hope that they are able to do that one day. And I hope that Dasani is able to like own a home one day. And like maybe while Chanel is still living and she can like
Yeah.
live with her child. Like I don't know. I want a fairy tale ending. That's probably not gonna happen, but I will continue to Google these people for years to come. Um
Yeah, keep
and
tabs on them for
yeah,
sure.
I mean, I feel like I read that that Dasani is in community college now. Yeah. Cause that was
yeah.
like,
The Times article. It wasn't in the book, but it was in the Times
right,
article.
right. Well, because when I don't remember, 8% of the way through the audiobook and sobbing my eyes out, I was like, what
I need
happened?
I know, I did the same
I can't find
thing.
out.
I literally
Like,
did the same thing. I like halfway through the book, I was like, I need to just Google this family if they are
yep.
still okay.
Hmm.
Because I really
So,
was I did
mhm.
not know where it was gonna go. So I was like,
I
oh
was all
god.
focused on Dasani. So then when we got through, the part of the book where we got to where she got to Hershey, maybe that's why I was like, yeah, because that's where I thought it was going. I was like,
Yeah,
here's
yeah.
how she does it.
Yeah,
Here it comes. And then I was like, ah.
yeah.
I know. Yeah.
But I just hope that everything is okay for them. And I hate that they are not a unique story.
Yeah. Oh, well, listeners, viewers, we have just discussed and chatted Invisible Child. I think we all came out of it just more learned humans. And so I definitely appreciate that. So thank you. Next month, I'm very excited. We're switching gears a little bit to kind of get us from our
Yeah. Thank
slumps.
God. Thank God.
Thank
Just
God.
yeah,
I'm
just a
so
little,
excited.
yeah, just a little lighter fare. So next month we will be reading a book by Michael Crighton. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Yes,
Okay.
Crichton.
A book by Michael Crighton. It's a little-known New York Times bestseller called Jurassic Park. I'm very
Woo!
excited to finally read Jurassic Park. An astonishing technique for recovering and cloning dinosaur DNA has been discovered. Now, humankind's most thrilling fantasies have come true. Creatures extinct for eons roam Jurassic Park with their awesome presence and profound mystery, and all the world can visit them for a price until something goes wrong. In Jurassic Park, Michael Crichton taps all his mesmerizing talent and scientific brilliance to create his most electrifying techno thriller. That's a very unique description. Techno thriller. That's awesome.
I'm so excited, y'all. I'm so excited.
Folks, you can join us on our next episode of the Ampliverse Book Club by grabbing your copy of Jurassic Park and any of the books that we've read in the Ampliverse Bookshop. And don't forget, if you purchase a book there, it not only helps the Ampliverse, but it also helps a local bookstore in your area. And that's at the bookshop.org/shop/the Ampliverse. Thank you so much for watching or listening along to the Ampliverse Book Club. You can find us and follow us on social media at the Ampliverse on Twitter and on Instagram. Feel free to keep the conversation going across the Ampliverse by joining our Discord server as well, linked on this episode. Finally, if you love the show and others we do here and if you feel obliged to tip, you can do that on our Ko-fi, linked on this episode, which keeps the light on in our universe. Allie, Catherine, thank you so much for joining us this month, and thank you for joining this discussion.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining our book club, and we'll see you next month. Until then, read on. Rawr.
Bye.
Bye.
Discovering voices, building worlds. The Ampliverse.